Imagine a remote homestead situated in the heartland of Kansas in the 1860s. Picture a modest cabin surrounded by rolling fields and dense forests, where the whisper of the wind carries secrets untold. This is where America's first family of serial killers dwelled, the Bloody Benders. But who were they, and what dark legacy did they leave behind? Stick around, because what unfolds next will both intrigue and terrify you. The Benders consisted of a family that likely appeared as ordinary as any frontier settlers of their time. There was John Bender, the patriarch, his wife, Elvira, their son, William, and their daughter, Kate. Together, they ran a stagecoach stop and a little inn, a quaint facade that masked their insidious nature. Can you sense the layers of dichotomy here? The comfortable, welcoming exterior against the horrific crimes hidden within its walls? We're diving into the depths of a story that reveals not only the chilling actions of the Bender family but also the mindset and societal factors that allowed them to thrive in an age marked by violence and distrust. From the outset, there's something unsettling about their story. The Benders capitalized on the cheap land of Kansas, a region teeming with opportunity and desperate souls searching for a better life. The sweet allure of their hospitality quickly turned sour, as they became notorious for luring in unsuspecting travelers, each man, woman, and child who strolled into their cabin becoming prey to the Bender family's malicious intent. How did this happen? What drove a family to commit such heinous acts? To understand the Benders, we must first comprehend the environment they operated in. The 19th century was a time of the great American West's expansion, with its promise of freedom and prosperity. However, this expansion was fraught with danger. Life on the frontier was brutal, marked by hardship, lawlessness, and vigilante justice. In this tumultuous backdrop, the Benders found not only a home but a culture that allowed them to blend into the chaos. Imagine it, a family so ordinary by day, yet so sinister by night. What are the psychology and desperation that turns the average person into something so monstrous? You might be wondering what specific techniques the Benders employed to ensnare their victims. The approach of the Bender family was particularly insidious. After welcoming travelers with warmth and hospitality, they would invite them to sit at a table that had been strategically placed adjacent to a trapdoor. This table wasn't just for meals, it served as a gateway to their gruesome acts. In this ostensibly simple dining area, guests would unknowingly place themselves in the line of danger as the Benders would incapacitate them, leading to their demise. The brutality of betrayal in this guise of hospitality is staggering. Now, let's shed light on the kind of horror that played out behind those walls. The victims, who would they become in this deadly game of cat and mouse? The Benders preyed on weary travelers on the infamous Santa Fe Trail. Many of these individuals carried money or goods, making them prime targets for robbery and murder. Can you imagine the last moments of someone entering that cabin, naively trusting the smiles they encountered? This is where the story truly grows dark and labyrinthine, peppered with questions that linger long after one has turned away from the narrative. You may find it puzzling that such activities could continue for so long without detection. The answer lies in both clever deception and sheer bad luck for the missing travelers. Families eagerly awaited news from those who set out on journeys, and with the vastness of the land, many simply vanished without a trace. In a world where communication was slow and often inaccurate, the ill fate of the travelers became just another tragic tale of the frontier, a harsh reality that masked the bloody truth. As the tale of the Benders unfolded, rumors began to swirl in nearby communities about the increasing number of men who had seemingly disappeared. However, the Benders maintained their facade. They would tell tales of tragic endings, stories of robbery, mishaps, often shifting the blame onto bandits or wild animals. The cunning nature of the Benders dug deep into the psyche of their neighbors. Trust easily turned to suspicion but rarely came to fruition due to the family's well-crafted pretense of innocence. This isn't just a story of murder, but one of societal failures and blindness. Why didn't more people suspect the Benders? Perhaps the truth was too horrible to imagine. perhaps it was simply easier to overlook the darkness when it was intertwined with the light of a family's offering. The notion of safety and normalcy in a violent world can breed an almost willful ignorance. Prepare yourself, this will only delve deeper into darkness. As police began to investigate the growing concern over the disappearing travelers, the Benders' carefully constructed illusion began to crumble. Tensions reached a boiling point when a group of local men decided to play the role of detectives, spurred on by tales of missing persons. This would mark the turning point of the Benders' reign of terror, a suspense-filled unraveling that would hold you on edge, wondering if they would outsmart the very community they had fooled for so long. You may ask, what happened during those investigations? Their inquiries led to the terrifying discovery of unspeakable horrors hidden beneath the floorboards of the Bender cabin. The atmosphere must have been electric, filled with both terror and disbelief, as the searchers unearthed human bones, remnants of lives lost to the blood-soaked soil. Indeed, a single glimmer of hope remained, the chance that the Benders might still be found before they could slip away into history. After a frenzy of activity from horrified locals and lawmen, the realization began to dawn on the community: this family, who had once seemed so innocuous, was at the heart of a horrific cabal that had caused numerous disappearances. The evidence gathered was enough to send shockwaves throughout the region. As the townspeople awakened to reality, the question echoed in their minds: how had they missed the signs? It was a testament to human nature and deception's power. The family vanished just as quickly and inexplicably as their victims. Eerie tales began sprouting about sightings of the Benders fleeing westward, their gory footprints washed away by the winds of time, leaving only speculation in their wake. But you have to wonder, what drives serial killers like the Benders to then abandon their families, their chosen paths, and their unspeakable deeds? Could such a family possibly regroup, or were they fated to slip into anonymity? As rumors spread and fear gripped the community, the search for the Benders took on a character all its own. The hunt was on, creating a channel of chaos as far as Chicago, with local lawmen, vigilantes, and curious citizens alike fanning out to find answers. Would they locate the remnants of this dark legacy, or would the Benders continue to haunt the collective memory of a society trying to reconcile what it wished to believe with the grisly bonds of reality? As one investigates the life and times of the Benders, you begin to uncover layers of moral questioning. Who are the real victims here? Were they simply products of circumstance, thrust into an unforgiving landscape that drove them to unspeakable acts? Or were they evil incarnate, seeking solace in bloodshed as they preyed on the weakness of others? This duality is what lingers in every retelling of their story. But the darker narrative doesn't end there. The eventual consequences of the Benders' actions also offer a broader commentary on the very nature of humanity. Would the frenzy that ensued in the aftermath of their departure lead to changes in how people viewed one another, shifting how trust and suspicion coexisted in close-knit communities? As whispers of the Bender family's exploits faded into folklore, the reality of their gruesome acts hung over the region like a shadow, reminding us that darkness often lurks behind everyday life. The blood-soaked history of the Benders would eventually be absorbed into the annals of frontier lore, but the implications of their story live on. How often do we look past the ordinary and fail to grasp the extraordinary horrors that could be hiding in plain sight? Now, we've only just begun to scratch the surface of the bloody Benders. The complexity of their motives and the chilling horror they inflicted upon an unsuspecting public are worthy of deep reflection. You can sense the eerie tension, can't you? There's still so much more to unravel, so hold tight. In the second part of this story, we'll delve deeper into the brutal aftermath of the Benders' actions. We'll explore the final shocking twists, examine their legacy, and reveal the lingering questions that remain unanswered. What fate awaited them, and what can these events teach us about our own society today? Prepare for more revelations that will leave your heart racing and your mind questioning what comes next. The search for the Benders became an obsession for many, fueled by a mix of bloodlust and a desire for justice. As men armed themselves with rifles and torches, local lawmen devised plans to scour the farthest reaches of the Kansas plains, where tales of the notorious family sowed fear and anger in equal measure. The locals formed vigilante groups, driven not just by the need to find the killers, but also by the need to reclaim their sense of safety, to rediscover a semblance of trust in their community that had been tarnished. As the hunt unfolded, the Bender family had already dissipated into the sprawling backdrop of the American frontier, disappearing from records and memory as if they had been devoured by the very land that had once welcomed them. Speculation ran rampant. Locals believed they might have assumed new identities, perhaps taking refuge among other immigrant families desperate for a new start. The Benders could even have fled further into the uncharted territories, evaporating into the collective consciousness of the country as nothing more than a ghost in the wind. The search for the Benders intensified as whispered tales of sightings proliferated, each rumor fueling the fire of desperation. Stories of Elvira's seemingly benevolent demeanor, paired with John's unsettlingly calm presence, circulated within taverns and homes, lending weight to the fear that those same smiles could hide malice behind them. In contrast, others attributed their absence to the biblical punishment, suggesting that the very land had swallowed them whole in retribution for their horrific deeds. In the shadows, however, lingering questions haunted those who had pursued the family. Was it possible that some townsfolk had recognized the Benders' true nature but chose to ignore it? The lawlessness and distrust that characterized frontier life fostered an environment where deniability thrived. It was much easier to imagine tragedy as a matter of happenstance than to confront the chilling notion that a family, perceived as anchors of hospitality, might possess a deeper inclination towards depravity. As the weeks turned into months, the case went cold, but the memory of the Bender family lingered in the townsfolk's minds. Investigations into the affairs of the missing travelers continued, piecing together their last known movements through letters, local reports, and conversations. Families of the lost created a tapestry of grief and anger that served as a constant reminder of the Benders' unpunished crimes. Pictures of the remains discovered under the Benders' cabin became fodder for newspaper articles, tightening the horror into sensational stories that would scare off future travelers, not only from the Benders' cabin but from the very idea that they could trust anyone on the frontier. As the years passed, the Benders transformed into something of folklore, myths gradually obscured by time and retold by each generation in tales of caution and horror. People began to speculate about their fates and question the very essence of the human condition. Some claimed to have seen a figure resembling Kate Bender working as a barmaid in a distant town, charming her way into the good graces of unsuspecting patrons. Others swore they had spotted John and William Bender near a mining camp, their presence veiled under layers of disguise. Whether these were mere figments of imagination or genuine encounter, they fed into the cherry-picked legend of the Bender family, a dark fairy tale embedded within the annals of American history. Though the Benders slipped into obscurity, the repercussions of their actions reverberated throughout the surrounding communities. In wake of their crimes, laws began to change, vigilance replaced naivety as settlers began utilizing cooperation to safeguard their families and forge stronger bonds among neighbors. The horrors perpetrated by the Benders sparked a collective consciousness, elevating the community dialogue on the importance of vigilance and awareness, forcing people to train themselves to perceive the human potential for both evil and good. In the wake of the Benders, the heart of Kansas began to reflect the dual nature of its Eastern European immigrant population. The darker narratives that had been relegated to whispers emerged from the shadows and filled the collective psyche. Immigrant settlers, who had fled the violence of their pasts, found new dangers they had never anticipated in a land once thought safe and abundant. Time wore on. The chilling story of the Benders continued to unofficially circulate among the national psyche, surfacing occasionally in plays, novels, and local legends. Their story became a lens through which one could view the broader expanse of the frontier experience, echoing themes of deceit, frailty, and survival despite pervasive threat. The confrontation between good and evil, often manifesting itself in the framework of family, was echoed in many of the narratives told and retold over campfires or at gatherings, evolving into a cautionary tale with every iteration. Yet, the question of their true motivations remained unanswered. Were the Benders molded by the harsh realities of their environment? Or were they predestined to sinister paths, always lurking behind the guise of hospitality? Their tale pushed communities to question the morality of their actions, scrutinizing both perpetrators and victims in a society marked by desperation. It forced individuals to confront the paradox of trust and betrayal, darkly reminding them that sometimes, the monstrous could wear the face of the familiar. Meanwhile, the Benders left behind an alluring yet grotesque, twisted legacy, a haunting reminder that darkness can reside beneath the surface of mundane life. Their serene existence as a family of settlers became tied to a shared history of violence. This juxtaposition highlights an uncomfortable truth about humanity, that often the things we take for granted can be the very vehicles through which evil operates unnoticed. As we reflect on the narrative of the Bloody Benders, the lessons extend beyond the scope of individual morality, they extend into the fabric of society itself. They symbolize the ideological battle between order and chaos, trust and suspicion. The Benders highlighted the stark warning against complacency, an echo of the timeless truth that in the pursuit of comfort and tranquility, one might unwittingly foster the very elements that threaten it. The haunting echoes of the Bender family's unspeakable acts serve as a residue within the historical consciousness of America. From tales spun within the warmth of homes to the chilling accounts that surface in books and where folklore meets factual history, the Benders' legacy complicates our perspective on humanity's potential for evil. The questions remain: what happens when we choose to turn a blind eye to our neighbors' disturbing behaviors? How can the fragility of trust within communities be better fortified against betrayal? As the sun sets over the Kansas plains, casting long shadows against the cabin's worn structure, remnants of the Benders emerge as a part of America's unsettling history, a reminder that legends don't have to become true, they already are. In this dark tale, we uncover not just a story of violence but rather profound truths about human nature, work, and the fragile boundaries that define our lives. Those who dare to delve deep into the annals of history are often greeted by the disquieting realization that recognizing the darkness can turn into our greatest shield. Without it, we risk letting our guard down entirely to the monsters that might be lurking across the dinner table. Now we must ask, their story may have faded from the forefront of history, but let it serve as a lesson, a haunting echo of what reality can become when society turns a deaf ear to its own shadows. As we move forward, let's remain vigilant, always aware that evil may walk among us, disguised in the most familiar of forms.